Hi and welcome to this lesson. I'm just going to show you how to stitch a single quilting hexi so that you can start to make your own quilt top like the one I'm working on here. I'll just move this out of the way just so I can show you what I'm doing. So here's a load that I've got stitched up already, ready to add into my quilt, but I'm going to show you how to sew a single one of those yourself. So looking at the tools that you need, first of all, as this is sewn by hand, there's very few tools that you need, which is part of the beauty of a hexi that's made out of small quilts. So the tools that I will be using, just need a small pair of scissors. You need some thread. Now the thread that I'm using is standard all-purpose Gutterman thread. I do know that you can get thread that's specifically for hand quilting. I've never tried it myself, so I don't know if it makes much of a difference, but I've always got on fine just with the standard all-purpose thread. You need a fabric hexi that you've cut out with your ruler, which I'll show you in a different lesson. But what you will need to have done is cut out a slightly smaller hexi with out of freezer paper and pressed that onto the back of your fabric hexi. The freezer paper is great, it's really cheap, really easy to get hold of, and once you've brought on roll it lasts you forever and ever, and it just gives you that stability to be able to make your hexi up. You need a load of hexis that are cut up ready. If you can see, I store mine, I cut them up in batches and then store them in a little pot ready for when I'm ready to sew them. And you need a hand sewing needle. I've got this one ready threaded. Normally I would use the thread which is a matching colour to my fabric, but I'm using a dark coloured thread here just so as it makes it easier for you to see what I'm stitching. Now one key thing I would say is be careful not to use too much thread for a single hexi. Pretty much the more thread you've got on the needle, the easier the chances that it's going to get all tangled up as you're sewing. So for the small size hexi that I've got here, I got perhaps a little bit longer than an arm's length, but then doubled it up. So I do like to use a double threaded needle. Okay, so I'll show you how to sew one. So what you're going to do to start off with is get your hexi with the freezer paper side facing up towards you and fold in the edges of the fabric on one of the corners. So fold it in there and fold it in there, and then just pinch the tip closed with your thumbnail. And what I'm going to do to start off with is just sew a little stitch quite close to the tip, making sure that you do catch both pieces of fabric, because that stitch is going to close that, keep that corner closed. So pull it through, just go back through again to make the stitch. Now on this first corner I'm just doing one small stitch to start off with. You'll see on the other corners I do two, and that's because I'm going to end up back in this first corner. So we'll see as I go. So move on to the next corner, just fold it over. Do a little stitch close to the tip, catching both pieces of the fabric. I'll just go through again to make the stitch. But this time I'm going to do a second stitch just underneath to help hold it more secure. I'll move on to my next corner. First stitch close to the tip. don't pull the thread too tight. What you don't want to happen is that the hexi curls up like that, which you can see that's what happens if you pull it too tight. You need it to lay flat, so when you do start piecing them together, you've got flat edges that can join. So I'm just making the stitch. And the second one just underneath. So you can see what's happening by doing that is you've got little stitches which are holding the corners in place, and then there's the piece of thread which goes from one corner to the next. That just makes sure that that flap of fabric that you've got folded over just stays in place for when you join them together. So move on to the next corner. If you do find that your thread looks like it's going to tangle, if you just let your needle drop, the weight of the needle will just pull the little crinkles out of the thread. So let's just do the next corner. And the second stitch. Now, as you can see, doing a hexi quilt really is a labour of love. It is certainly a slow project. It takes ages and ages, but what's great about it is it's really portable. So you can fill a little tub full of hexis. All you need is a hand sewing needle, a bit of thread and some scissors, and you can take the project with you. I try to set myself a goal of doing at least 3 hexis, adding 3 hexis onto my quilt per day. And once you start seeing it coming together, it's really rewarding. So that's the next corner. And my second stitch. Okay, I'm on to my final corner now. First stitch near to the tip, and a little stitch underneath. Okay, so that's all 4 corners are now stitched, and the folded fabric is held in place around the perimeter, apart from this final one here, and that's because we are ending back where we started, so I need to do that final stitch. Pull it through again to make the stitch, and then to finish it off I just put the needle through until I've got a loop of thread. I pass my needle through the loop and pull it just to knot it off, and then I'll just do that again. There's my loop, pass the needle through and pull, and there's the back of the stitched hexi. So I'll just snip the thread off. So that's what it looks like on the back. You don't have to worry about them being really neat and tidy. This is going to be on the inside of the quilt, so you're not going to see it. It is just to give that folded appearance on the outside so that you can put all your hexes together. So I'll add that one to my pile of hexes ready to add on to my quilt. And I'll just show you a little bit of how mine's looking so far. So I'm using a range of Tilda fabrics, and what I love about Tilda is you get quite a few fabrics that all work really well together. So what that means is I haven't had to plan too much about what hexi I'm going to place where. I just randomly sew them together, just making sure that I don't have 2 of the same patterned hexes right next to each other. Other than that, I do just add them in really randomly. If you look at the back, so you can see there, that's what it looks like at the back. One thing I will point out is you do keep the freezer paper inside the hexi, because that gives you that stability when you're looking to join them together, which I'll show you in a different lesson. But then as you are progressing, you do remove them as you go, and that just makes your quilt top a little bit flexible. So if I needed to fold over that edge, for example, I can scrunch this area up because there's no freezer paper making it stiff. But you do need to make sure where you've still got hexes to join onto hexes, keep the freezer paper there to give you that stability. Okay, so that's how to sew a single hexi. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson.